Hi everybody, hello, and welcome. A number of years ago, was maybe 25 years ago, early parts of my career, if you can call this a career, I remember visiting somebody who had come to one of my classes, and he liked to call himself a skeptic. So, many of us are skeptics, but not everybody goes around with a business card saying, I'm a skeptic. For some reason, he needed to make that point. Being that, so we met and we discussed different matters. And he said to me, if you can, he was big into poetry and he had his favorite lines and intellectual and so on. So he said to me, if you can capture in a sentence or two sentences something as powerful as, let's say, William Blake's famous poem, where he writes the classic, where he says, "To hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and heaven in a moment, and so on," then you'll convince me that the Torah and Judaism has some truth to it. And it happened to be this week, 25 years ago, in this week's chapter. So I said to him, well, William Blake lived a few hundred years ago, and actually he plagiarized it from the Torah. And I pointed out to him that there's a verse in this week's chapter that says, "Avram Zaken Baba Yamim," that Abraham aged and he came to his days. And I said, Baba Yamim, if you know some Hebrew, is a very poetic term. Baba Yamim, what does it mean to come into your days? So the Zohar says that he came with his complete days. Every moment was complete. And the Zohar explains that every moment is energy. And Abraham was able to tap into every energy of his entire life, every second and every moment. So when Blake said to hold infinity, to grasp infinity in a moment, or how does the expression go? To hold I think it goes like this: to see a heaven in a wildflower, and infinity in an hour is the expression. Says he basically took it from this, whether he was conscious or not. So anyway, this man, I don't know if this was an excuse or not an excuse, but ultimately he actually will not call himself a skeptic any longer today, because it touched him. He started to study and he began to realize that many of the classical ideas that we discover in our journeys are there long ago in the Torah. And this is not to pull rank, it just happens to be that the first Abraham was not Abraham Lincoln, but Abraham in the Bible. And it goes back thousands of years. And it was just lucky that he was the pioneer. So it's fascinating to be able to look into a story that happened so many thousands of years ago, and that anyone who's ever been to Israel, you walk the paths of Israel. This is, as opposed to New York, I don't know what walked here thousands of years ago, but there that in every nook and cranny, you have people who we know by name, where they lived and what they did. So it's quite awesome that we're still here to talk about it, the grandchildren of Abraham's. So it's besides a nice journey into nostalgia. As they say, nostalgia is not like what it used to be. But besides that, it's also more than just inspiring, especially when you recognize some of the eternal messages and discover that some of the things we struggle with are actually addressed and answered in texts and stories, narratives that happened many, many years ago. So I thought it appropriate to take one of those messages in this context of time itself. And a word like that, like I just described, that Abraham aged, Babayami came to his days, which the Zohar of course points out, and others, that it seems redundant. You say someone ages, of course they came into their days. So what it really means, the Zohar's expression is Babayami means B'yayim Shleimin. He came with his complete days. And if you look throughout the Bible, throughout the Torah, you'll find fascinating insights into time itself. Now remember, time was not really analyzed until around 100 years ago, when Einstein, who looked at time in a new way, and ever since physics has changed by his perspectives. Now Einstein too was Jewish, and though he may not have taken it directly from the Bible, but I guess in his genes he had certain insights. And it's really, today, it's like common knowledge, many things about time, that anyone who read the Torah texts over thousands of years would have been far ahead of their time, no pun intended, with the nature of what time is. And one of the places we find it is right here in our chapter. I don't know if any of you read Abraham Joshua Heschel's book on Shabbos. Makes the point that the human race throughout history has always been known for conquering space. We've conquered space. First of all, space on Earth. We've taken wildernesses. We've tamed the elements. We've cleared out space. We've created cities. Maybe some people say we've conquered too much space. But we've conquered space, and we're able to now live in places that once were uninhabitable. We're conquering other spaces and outer space and so on. But time has never been conquered by anyone. Because time, the clock ticks, time affects us all. Everybody ages, and I don't want to depress anybody, but everybody does age, and erosion and deterioration is the nature of existence. Time is constantly moving. So beating the clock, so to speak, or beating time, or conquering time, never seemed possible. So he makes the point, which either way is taken from these Zohars that I'm citing here, that Judaism has always made it a point to try to conquer time, not just space. So space requires just simply brute strength. To conquer time, you can't conquer it quite like you can conquer space if you have enough weapons, you have enough machinery, you have enough technologies, you figure out how to control a space. Time, because time is so subtle and it's not quite as physical, requires a different type of conquest. And the point is, we say it every time we say Kiddush. So everyone knows what Kiddush means. Kiddush means you make a blessing on wine, but Kiddush means to sanctify. And especially on holidays, we say an expression, Mekadesh Yisrael v'Hazmanim, with the concept of Kiddush Hazman, sanctifying time. We sanctify time. Every month when we go out and we bless the moon, we're Mekadesh the Levana. We sanctify the moon and its cycle. And I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but it's an interesting concept, sanctifying time. What is the meaning of sanctifying time? Sanctifying time means that though time is made up of very specific blocks, specific phases and stages, we have the ability to do something with that time and fill it with something that's called sanctity. And in effect, it changes time in some way. It doesn't stop the clock. Clock keeps on ticking, but it changes the moment that you've experienced that in that particular moment. And in the terms of conquest, it's a way of conquering time. And when the Zohar says that Abraham, his days were filled, basically was saying that every moment in time is energy. To quote another Zohar, just for the record, the Zohar is the classic work of Jewish mysticism, authored by Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, Lag BaOmer fame. He was a Talmudic scholar, and he dictated much of it to his student Rab Abba. And the Zohar tells the whole story about the last days of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's life. So the Zohar is a text mostly in Aramaic. It's structured around the Bible, meaning structured by the Parshas. So the Zohar has a lot of commentary on the actual Torah. One of its early commentaries, it talks about, that in the beginning of the story of Genesis, it talks about the creation of 6 days. And the expression of the Torah says, Sheishis Yomim, 6 days God created heaven and earth. Exactly like that, Sheishis Yomim. So the Zohar says it's missing a word. In English, you don't say 6 days created. You say in 6 days, or in the span of 6 days, in the period of 6 days. So where's the in, the b'sheishet yomim it should have said? The Zohar says because the verse has to be read literally, that the 6 days were created. It's not within time. Time itself is a force. And this is really what Einstein discovered, that time is not just an invisible, man-made, imaginary thing. It actually is a force in nature. It's a force just like space. Time is energy. And this is what the Zohar says very specifically. Every day has its energy. Sunday is sun energy, Monday is moon energy, with those names, Sunday, Monday. In Hebrew, Sunday is the day of chesed, kindness, and Monday is the day of gevurah, discipline, and Tuesday is the day of compassion, and Wednesday is the day of netzach, ambition, endurance, and Thursday is humility, and Friday is foundation, bonding, and Shabbat is Malchus, dignity. So every day is really an energy flow, which is why we begin counting every week again. Why do we stop at 7 and I go 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, etc.? Why do we stop at 7? So most people say, listen, you got to stop somewhere. We got to have a weekend. We have to so on. And in the few hundred years ago, when the metric systems were established, so everything was put into equal numbers, tens and hundreds and thousands. Europe likes to laugh at the United States. Never embraced the metric system because it's so symmetrical. But one of the suggestions actually was, just like measurements are in cubits and in tens, and as I said, in multiples of tens, a suggestion was that the week should be 10 days. That would really make it really balanced. Everything is in tens. Now that was never embraced, probably because no one wanted to wait 9 days for a weekend, and probably other reasons. Now they're trying to turn the work week into 3 days, 4 days, whatever it may be. But from a Jewish perspective, all these things, there's no dilemma at all. The reason 7 is not some type of man-made thing. It actually is a cycle of time, and time is not a linear flow. We usually think of the river of time, they call it. It's not a linear flow. Time is more like a spiral. Think of it like a spring. A spiral that orbits like on an axis. And therefore, every seventh day, it just returns to that point, at a different point in a different plane. And that's where the cycle begins again, the energy begins again. So it's a cycle of 7 energies, essentially. That's what it comes down to. Which explains another simple matter that we all deal with, which is our significant dates, life cycles. Celebrate your birthday. Now, most people don't think about it too much, about birthday. Okay, that's the day I was born, and every year, that day is the day I want gifts, or I want to be honored, or some people hate their birthdays. However you celebrate or choose not to celebrate your birthday. But what is it really? Is it just a commemorative date that something happened 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago? What would be the median age of this group here? Let's say 25 years ago. Is it just a commemorative date? And for that matter, you could ask the question about any significant anniversary. Anniversaries, holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. What happens on that day? Is it just remembering something that happened to happen that day, could have happened another day? And the answer is absolutely not. From a Jewish perspective, your birthday is a day where your energy entered into existence. And every year your spiral begins again, your cycle begins again. So in your birthday there's actually the same alignment that existed the first time you were born, repeats itself. Obviously in a different plane, in a different dimension, but it's the same energy, which is far more intriguing. That means your birthday is a natural opportunity. It's not just a day that just happens to be the day that marks an event that happened years ago. That day actually opens up a window of opportunity, as does every holiday, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, anything. Because the take on time is that time is energy, and energy flows like a spiral, and therefore cycles are constantly happening. Now, the fact that we don't feel it, well, what do we feel anyway? How much energy do we really feel? That's just a matter of being sensitive to the moments. The Zohar as well, and the other Kabbalistic writings actually say that the 24 hours in the day, every hour, one of the tzirufim, one of the permutations of the divine name of Yud Kei Vav Kei changes. As a matter of fact, they say when the Alter Rebbe, Reb Shneur Zalman, was in prison and had no clue what time it was, simply because of his spiritual sensitivity, he was able to know when the hours changed because of his sense of just what's the energy in the moment. So every moment of energy, every moment of time, whether it's a second, whether it's a minute, whether it's an hour, whether it's a day, whether it's a week, a month, a year, just go on. Might as well go a decade, a century, a millennium, is all defined by different energy cycles. And there's fascinating discussions about what kind of energies and how it changes, and the difference between a monthly cycle and a weekly cycle. Just that itself, just understanding it and appreciating, can make your life pretty exciting, because then there's no moment that's dull. There's no dull moment, literally, because every moment is new energy. Which is why people who are in touch with that their lives are constantly, they're always excited. They're always dancing and singing. I don't mean literally, but within. Because they are in touch with the pulse of existence, which is a pulsating energy, which is called time. And in many of the mystical texts, it talks about time actually as a pulsating energy. Rotzei and Shuv, time is like a heartbeat, constantly in movement. You see, we live in a material world where we can deceive ourselves into thinking that life is static. What do they call it? A couch potato. See, a couch potato is a uniquely man-made invention. Nothing on earth is a couch potato. Even potatoes are not potatoes. Potatoes are always growing. They're always moving. Everything, as I said, is subject to change. You know, I've mentioned this, a guy that I know, he happens to be a cardiologist. He says to me, I have so much anxiety in my life, my family life, my personal life, my professional life. I wish I just had a little calm, too much. So I said, like what, like a flat line? So he said, no, not that calm, that calm. When you look at a cardiogram, what makes it stand out is that it's a wave. It looks exactly like that. That's what you want it to look like. You don't want it to look like that. And you don't want peaks and too many peaks and valleys either. You want balance. In the Kabbalistic language taken from the book of Ezekiel, it's called Rotzei V'shuv. Rotzei V'shuv is a very interesting expression. It means literally to run and return. A little more poetically, the attention and resolution. The secret of life. The proper measure of harmony is the perfect balance between tension and resolution. If you have too much resolution, too much calm, no angst at all, that's not healthy for anybody. If you have constant anxiety and constant tension, it's equally problematic. What you want to have is a measure of angst, not anxiety, angst, a certain measure of healthy angst, motivation, something that prods you on, that you want to continue to climb the ladder, but at the same time an element of resolution where the tension leads to resolution and then new tension begins. And unfortunately, because sometimes our tension levels are so high, we opt for the other extreme. We just want to get rid of it all. And that equally is problematic. And that's really the secret of life. If you're able to create a Rotzei V'shuv index of your life, the key is to find a wave. The wave. And the wave requires, obviously, a very balanced. And time is described exactly like that, like a wave. Not like a particle, but like a wave. And as such, as the Zohar says, time is energy, and every moment has its energy. So, I just did a Google search this morning, and I was looking at how many seconds the average person lives. So if you say, let's say the average 80-year-old, let's say 80 years old, and everyone should have 120 years, but I just chose 80, so it comes down to be something like 25 billion seconds. Maybe that's a little too much. If people like immediately they see 25 billion seconds, okay, if I had $25 billion, what would that mean? Not bad, it's pretty good, right? I mean, it doesn't come close to the U.S. deficit. Most people don't live that many trillion of seconds. So that's the seconds. What does it break down into days? I believe it's 29,000 days. And something like 700,000 what would be days? Hours. And as I said, 25 billion seconds. So I was thinking about it. If we really had a meter, and you actually checked off every second or every minute for that matter, and then you say to yourself, okay, here are the wasted minutes of my life, and here are the filled ones. What would it look like? Quite depressing. I don't think many of us would want to really fill that out. Because we're talking about all the time. Of course, you can eliminate a third of our lives are asleep, another 5% in the bathroom, another 10% commuting, but it's not that very pleasant to discover how much time we really waste. Of course, you could, if you like to justify yourself, I'm sure you could say, no time is wasted. I did this, I was daydreaming, I was preparing for this, preparing for that. Well, all of us have the we call it the inner child, the inner procrastinator. For some of us, it's more outer than inner, and so I'm not here to suggest that we all have to depress ourselves into figuring out how much time we waste and how much time we spend. But what we could glean from Abraham and from the story that we're discussing here is how to make your life matter. Because at the end of the day, it's how you use your time that defines your life. Because everything's happening at a moment in time. Whether it's a relationship, whether it's your own personal growth, whatever it is you're doing is happening in time. So it comes down to, at the end of the day, after all, it comes down to how that time is used. And the interesting thing is that time is compared not just to energy, but to life. So in a sense, a wasted moment is like a lost life. Now, it's not quite lost life as we like to put it, God forbid, a real lost life, but it's a loss that never returns again. That makes it lost. So when we say that we sanctify time, or Abraham came with his full days, what's really being said is that he used each day to the fullest. So imagine you will receive a gift. Someone gives you a gift, and you squander it. You throw it away, or you lose it, or you just ignore it. So here something was given, an opportunity that you simply didn't use. That is far worse than just missing a deadline, because that does not return again. So the way Judaism looks at time is the following. Time is a gift. Every moment is a gift. Every day is a gift. Everyone is a different energy. It's a different opportunity. So people always talk about, why is it that God doesn't answer my prayers? Why don't I have what I'm asking for, or what I need, or what I want? And very few think about the fact that every moment that you're given in life is a gift. That's your answer. You have the moment, it has energy in it. Are you using it? But we look for something else, or we look for something magical. We're looking outside of... Every morning that we wake up in the morning, we say Moda'ani. Why do we say Moda'ani? We acknowledge that God returned our soul to us. Now, maybe we take it for granted, but it could have not happened that way. You could have not woken up that day. God forbid. But we take for granted our gifts, and we want things on our terms. And we forget the mere fact that we're alive right now, and we're breathing, and we're able to walk around and do as we wish. That itself is your gift. That's your answer. That God is basically giving you a vote of confidence, saying, here you are, I'm giving you life. It has energy in it. Find out what this energy is and start tapping into it. So sometimes we ask for things, and maybe the gift was a gift wrapped and given to you at your door, and you just refused to open it, or you thought or you didn't realize it's a gift, or you took it for granted. So life itself is a gift, and the time that we have is a gift. Man like Abraham was aware of this all the time, and that's why Baba Yomim, every day he used to the fullest. Now you'll say, well, anyway, he died at the end anyway. Yeah, but he died, but we talk about him now 3,500 years later. Did he really die? Yes, his body died, but what he did, what he accomplished, never dies. So for a person who, God forbid, wasted all their entire life, when they die, not only do their physical bodies die, then everything they didn't achieve anything. Now it's unlikely to find someone that has not achieved anything. I'm just using it as a extreme example. But a person like Abraham was the other extreme. Every moment was used to the fullest. And that is what it means to conquer time. To conquer time means that the time, the energy that was given was used to the fullest, and then it's never lost, because what you did in that moment lives on forever. Had it been squandered, then the time passes, and then now you've moved on, and it was not utilized. The opportunity was not utilized. So if you just replace the word moments and seconds and minutes with the word gifts, the whole thing would be a different approach. What are they? One of these poems, they say the past is gone, the future is not here, the present. It's called a present, a gift, like a present. You're given a present. And living in the moment and appreciating that is one of the most difficult things to do. How many of us are able to just be in a moment and be present without thinking, what am I missing? What's coming tomorrow? And so on. So that's the challenge, and that's what we shall discuss. How do you enter into such a zone? Because to be entered in such a place requires a certain type of focus. And it's hard to find. You find it very rare. That a person is in a moment and nothing else matters except that moment. Now that we live in the world of texting and mobile phones, it's become even more amplified. I was sitting, I always tell the story, but it just captures the modern times in which we live. I'm in a car with someone, I'm trying to get his attention, but he's busy on his phone. So I texted him. Now we're sitting right near each other, mind you. And he looks at the text, right? He's about to respond, then he realizes I'm sitting there. He almost didn't even realize I was sitting there, frankly. So he says, why are you texting me? I'm sitting right here because I can't get your attention, I told him. And this isn't a joke, this happens to be true. Now, of course, it's not rude anymore because both people are texting, so it's a problem. But I find it really disturbs me, not because somebody's rude to me, it disturbs me if I'm doing the same thing. Being present, can you just sit face to face with someone, look in their eyes, and have a conversation? Becoming a rare commodity today. Was that story they tell about this professor? He was too busy giving his class, He wanted to write books and become a celebrity. So he didn't have time for that hour to give to his students. So he came up with a great idea. He recorded his class in his free time when he was traveling, gave it to an assistant. He didn't have to come in even to the university. An assistant put down on the desk a CD player or whatever it was, a tape recorder. And the class was required to listen and take notes. I mean, today you could have done it also on the internet or whatever. And then they were expected to, just as they had taken the class with him. Now, one day he happened to have to visit the university, so he's checking out. He wanted to see how great innovation is working. You can imagine, he didn't get the Nobel Prize for this idea. He comes and pulls up, he opens, closely, sneaks up to the door, doesn't want anyone to notice him, and he peeks in, and he's looking, and to his shock, there's no one in the classroom. On every desk, there's a tape recorder in the record mode. So his is in play, and they're in the record mode. And what you learn from this, he realized that you teach by example. They learned very well. They did what he did. They also got too busy. Why do they need to come to the class? They all came, the tape recorder, then they send an assistant. You know, my machine talks to your machine, as they say. And that's how it is. So I always say to myself, thank God, as much as technology will develop, I just hope never anyone even thinks of the idea one day that they'll find a virtual mother, for example. They will not need a mother. You'll just have a computer embrace you, a baby. Can you imagine? Pretty chilling to think of that, right? Hopefully there's some things that will remain human, real human. And unfortunately, what I find is it doesn't bother me. Technology is a great tool. But what happens is it becomes a great smokescreen as well. I was just, I think I mentioned this a while back. So I was counseling a couple that were having many difficulties, put it mildly. And I was reviewing with them their life and this and that, and I said to them, I know this may sound like a strong suggestion, strong medicine, but my little suggestion is the following: that you should move the television out of the bedroom. Because it was very obvious that in the evening, the only time they are finally with each other, and I'm not even talking now about intimacy or anything like that, just a conversation, the television went on, and it was very convenient for both of them. They can laugh together, we like the show, the Tonight Show, this guy, that guy, there's always entertainment. Bottom line, it was perfect. So even the few minutes that they could speak to each other, they must be with each other because they're sleeping in different bedrooms or different homes, the television was a convenient smoke screen. And I saw their reaction was like, they say, well, you can't do that. Like what? I said, why not? What is it like? And I saw how addicted they were. But it's interesting. Finally they did listen to me because I was pretty harsh and I said, why are you coming to me for advice if you're not listening to a basic suggestion I'm making? Yes, you're going to be vulnerable. They say, what are we going to do? I said, you'll talk to each other. Or you'll just fall asleep right away. Whatever it is. And I said, and no reading newspapers and no other things. But they were terrified because they haven't done that since their courtship when they dated each other and they wanted to seduce each other 10 years earlier. So it was really, it was like so blatant to me, they basically no longer have conversations. And there's always good reasons. They're busy here and busy there. Now, the truth is, I don't even know if they had conversations when they dated. It was just an incentive to have a conversation. So it was like a masquerade. And honestly, I'm not asking you to challenge yourself, but are you able to have a conversation with someone? And I don't just mean talk about sports and weather and all the usual scapegoats, the usual suspects. To have a conversation about something that matters. Technology, what I find is becoming, for those that don't, is another convenient way to avoid conversations. And it goes back to how can you be present? How can you be in a moment? So there's a story that I heard. It always intrigued me. I remember hearing the Rebbe told the story. It was in 1970, and he was giving a talk. Now there were a group of people from Israel who were on a charter plane that was scheduled to leave, let's say 4 o'clock in the afternoon. This talk was it was like 12 o'clock. So the Rebbe was sensed that people were like edgy, that they got to get to the airport. So he told the story. He told the following story that in 1926 or 27, in very dangerous times in the former Soviet Union, this was Stalin's terror, and Stalin was just another form of Hitler, just in a different form and fashion. So he remembers, he told the story, he says, I went into my father-in-law, and I saw that he was supposed to go, there's a time where he had to go to an emergency meeting to Moscow. It was extremely dangerous to travel. It was a secret meeting because anyone could be arrested at any given moment. So, usually if you're in that situation, you're pretty much not panicking, but you're not exactly calm either. He says, I walk in, my father-in-law is sitting there, he's reading a sefer, he's studying something, as if it's like nothing's going on. In 15 minutes he has to go on this trip, which has to be done with a whole clandestine way and all kinds of stuff. And I was like amazed. So I said to myself, the Rebbe said, Moich Shal Talev is a concept which means self-control. There are people who have that type of what's called Moichen the Godless is an expression in Kabbalistic terms. It means powerful minds, that they're able to have such composure and presence of mind, even in the most dangerous situation, they can actually control their heartbeat. So nothing frightens them. So he said, but he's still, to that extent, so he said to his father-in-law, to that extent. So his father-in-law said, my father taught me, he used the expression, how to have hatzlacha in zman, which means how to have success in time. And I asked him, what does hatzlacha in zman mean? What does that mean to have success in time? What kind of blessing is that? To say to someone, you should have successful time. So he answered me with a story of one of the great middle-aged Torah scholars. His name was the Rashba, Rav Shmuel ben Aderes. So he was a great scholar, and it was known that his schedule was extremely busy. During the day, he had morning classes. Then people came to see him, counseling. He had to paskin, resolve certain halachic issues. And then, of course, he had his own obligations. And he still had time every day to take a walk for an hour. And it was always perfect. And they always said, how could he do it? It was hatzlacha in time. He had hatzlacha in time. And the answer was given. He was taught the secret of how to be in the moment. That when you're doing something, there's nothing else but that moment. There's an expression called being a pnimi, that what you're doing, you do completely in that moment. And that's what his father-in-law told the Rebbe. That's what I was taught. So right now, in this moment, in fact, in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, when I have to go on a very dangerous trip, that we'll deal with then. Right now, I'm in this moment. Now, this is pretty foreign for many of us, such a concept. Many of us who are taking a trip, it's already a month before we're already on downtime because we're preparing for the trip. Because it's a great opportunity to, not have to be so productive because I'm traveling. Some people say the common cold saves many people from committing suicide because it's a great excuse for not being productive. I'm under the weather. I'm almost under the weather. I was under the weather. It becomes like, a good excuse for not being that productive. And we like excuses like that. People who have that ability to be there in the moment, what is really their secret? And what can we learn from them? So clearly, one thing they have going for them is they know that where they are, in that moment, in that time, that's where they should be. And they don't second guess that. Most of us don't have that type of confidence. We're not sure necessarily that what we're doing is what we should be doing. That doesn't mean we're not necessarily successful, but that type of certainty, that my job is what I should be doing, the place I'm living, the person I'm with, the person I married, the person I'm thinking of marrying, that this is the certainty. Most of us don't have such certainty. With a good explanation. How could one be certain? We're all human beings. We don't know the future. We don't know many secrets, mysteries. All we can do is make the best decisions based on circumstances. But certainty, how do you have certainty? And there's ways to get that certainty. A person like Abraham and anyone else that you'll find has what I call the hatzlacha in zman, this success, this ability to be in the moment, were able to had a sense of purpose. And they knew that their mission, this is what they should be doing. So if you knew that absolutely certain, how do you think time would work for you? A whole different way. You would not have to worry about what's going to happen in 10 minutes. Because this is now the moment that has presented itself. This is what you should be doing now. You know that is for sure. So what's the point? Why do you need to be so-called multitasking? Or preparing yourself for some other moment? But we don't have that type of certainty. We have instead what we'll call, for lack of a better word, insecurities and fears. And though we may not admit it, though we may not be always aware of them, fear means that you're not really sure that of yourself and of your contribution. Now, of course, this always goes back to our own childhoods. If our parents were not certain of themselves and did not allow us and did not infuse us with a sense of confidence, clearly that constantly undermines that ability. Because then you're in the middle of doing something, and then there's the voices that start haunting you and saying, should you be doing this, should you be doing something else? The fear of failure, which right away means that even while you're doing it, there's a concern, are you doing it right? The fear of judgment. You'll be judged. You'll be evaluated based on performance. Well, it all goes back to a lack of certitude and a lack of certainty, which goes back to a topic I've talked about many times, the idea of your mission in life. How many of us even know that we have a mission in life? Now, no business can function without a mission statement. So, of course, the provocative question, can you and I, can you function without a mission? Now, if no business can, how can we? And then you ask people, so what then is your mission? Most people have no clue. Most people don't even have a clue they should have a mission. Now, push comes to shove, many people come up with very nice platitudes, like my mission is to be happy, to find the right woman, the right man, to build a healthy family, to be successful. There's a whole bunch of lines like that you can always come up with. But that's as good as a mission as if a company would say, our mission is to make money and to be successful and be happy. You never heard that. It was a business mission statement, because every company is supposed to be doing that. A mission statement consists of a very particular contribution, focus, that's unique to this company, not to another's. Google's mission statement is, just for an example, is to organize all the information in the world and make it readily accessible. I don't know if it's the exact word, but that's the content. And there are tens of thousands of employees, and every project, with all the billions of dollars, all come to fulfill that mission. It's pretty awesome when you think about it. How do you get so many different departments and so many individuals aligned? Because obviously the mission is very simple in its statement, but it has many manifestations. And the same with any successful entity. You cannot begin without knowing what your objective is. So then comes the big klotz kasha. How do you translate klotz kasha? The obvious question that nobody even asks. So, what about you and I? What is our objective? What's your objective in life? And we come up, as I said, we can come up with about quick responses, but sadly, most of us have not even thought about it. And even if we have, it's not really with enough investment to come up with an answer. So you could say, well, one second, so how can we get away with that? A business cannot get away with it because a business is defined by money, by profit. And if it's not going to have focus, it's going to have waste. And with this waste and inefficiency, someone's going to have to pay the bill. So there's a thing called accountability. We've heard this word, accountability. The thing that we all hate. Accountability. So in a company, you have to have that, and efficiency, the focus is what keeps it aligned. Even with focus, we see how many companies struggle. Because as soon as you have more than one person working in a company, actually even with one, you need someone aligning the different opinions and different departments and so on. When it comes to our own personal lives, who are we accountable to? Once we're out of school and out of our homes, who are we accountable to? God? Okay, that's nice, but God doesn't really come with a bill for you to pay. At least not ostensibly. We don't see it. So Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, the guilt inside of us decides, let's make a deal for the year. So God will make a deal. Little superstition here, superstition there. We'll do a few little things. Hopefully God will say, okay, great, I'll give you another year. But we don't have accountability quite in the same way. There's no IRS. There's no accountants. There's no reporting to shareholders or whoever else you have to report to. But if you think it has less damage or less impact, that's not correct. It just creates what's called fragmentation. And fragmentation turns into ultimately anxiety. Human beings abhor fragmentation. So if you were to list everything you did today, for example, from the moment you woke up, talk about moments, all the moments of your day. Let's not go to the seconds. Seconds are a little overwhelming. Do it by hour if you like, by half hour, by whatever. If you listed everything you did today, you'll come up with, I've tested this, approximately 100 to 150 items. And I'm talking about everything. From waking up, from pressing the snooze button. You can count that as one even if you press it 5 times. That's, we don't have to go that crazy. From showering, from exercising, showering, whatever regimen it is. Brushing your teeth, getting dressed, tying your shoelaces, commuting, coffee breaks, tea breaks, another coffee break, lunch breaks, a few important meetings or not important meetings, whatever they are. So everyone has their list of everything you did, what you've read. Now, if you try to draw a thread between these items, you're not going to find too many things that belong in the same category. Because they're separate items. Now, so what? You could say, okay, big thing. So I did 100 fragmented activities. Well, 100 is not so bad one day, but it starts accumulating. Accumulation. Exponential growth, it's called, of fragments. And what you end up having is day after day, and week after week, and month after month, and decade after year after year, and decade after decade. At some point, you have millions of fragments that have no connection to each other. Tell me, can any person live with that? Imagine you coming home, and there's millions of things all over the place, and you have no clue where they belong. What would it do to you? You'd go crazy. Even if you're not a super organized person, you need cohesiveness in your life. Everybody has some cohesiveness. And even people that we consider disorganized, like you come to their desk and it's a desk that goes all the way to the thing, they think they're organized. They think they know how to find everything on the desk. My father was a little like that. So I remember seeing a desk, I said, how could you work like that? So of course there's the classic joke that if empty desk is if a cluttered desk is a sign of a cluttered mind, what's an empty desk a sign? But they say you should have one thing in your desk, one at a time. So he had this desk full of things, and I used to say to him, so I said to him, show me something. He says, well, tell me what you want me to find. I told him. Yeah, he knew exactly. It was like the bottom of this pile there, because that was for him in his mind, this was organization. So however, human beings by nature abhor fragmentation. Look at the children, from youngest of ages, without any training, you take, let's say, give a child a toy. Those toys, where you have to fit objects into different spaces. They naturally will fit the triangles into triangles, the squares into squares, rectangles, spheres, the whole thing. Because humans gravitate toward making connections. Some scientists wonder why, and no one really has an answer. Just like they don't have an answer of why in science, for example, there's an axiom, a given, that the simplest theory is always the best theory to choose. There's no reason for this. It's simply a consensus among scientists that the simplest path is always the best path to choose. Ask any scientist, do you have proof why it's that way? No. I mean, some argue it's like that in nature, everything always looks for the shortest, like for example, water running from one place to the next will always look for the shortest route, obviously. But the same thing is with order. We are human beings that by nature we want to connect things, which is really the driving force of all science, of all understanding. Taking things apart and putting it together in some organized way. Trying to find a rule that can explain many phenomena. It's the essence of a scientific theory. This way we have a bunch of thousands of different phenomena, millions of different, we find one rule, now it makes sense. And they're still looking for the big, great, grand, unified field theory in physics, where they can put together all the four main sides, electromagnetism, the nuclear force, the strong and weak, and the gravity. Or quantum physics and relativity. What happened? Okay. Getting too excited? Or just a faulty tablecloth? Okay. It's fine. So, from a Torah point of view, the reason is very obvious. Because what do we say? What's the most famous prayer in Judaism? Shema. What's the last word in Shema? Echad. The divine unity, the essence of Judaism. Well, unity, that not just God is one, but reality is one. And all of existence is one field of energy. I don't know how many of you have today. By now, millions of people have seen. It's a book today by the neuroscientist who spoke in one of the TED Talks on, what was it called? Stroke of Genius, I think. You seen that talk? Fascinating talk. So here was this woman, a neuroscientist. What's her name? It'll come to me. You could check it out. She gives this talk. Why did she go into neuroscience in the first place? Because her brother was schizophrenic. So this drove her to want to understand somewhat the mind. Well, as luck would have it, like she calls it, stroke of luck, she suffers a stroke. But being a trained neuroscientist, she knew exactly what she was undergoing, she was going through. And the stroke affected the left side of her brain. So it was like, it affected the right side of her brain, which affects the left side, affected the left side of the brain, which affected the right side of the body. Now the left and right brain, as you may know, the left brain is the brain that is so-called the details, and the right brain is like the creative side, which is, remember the book, The Drawing on the Right Side of Your Brain, stuff like that. The right brain makes connections, sees things in a unified fashion. Now, in most situations, we don't really distinguish between the two because they're working together in tandem. But God forbid, in a case like in this case, this is the essence of her talk, and it's completely a secular scientist describing an experience. And just to sum it up, what she said was, when I heard it, I couldn't believe it. It's literally like almost taken straight out of Kabbalistic texts about the mind and about human experience, about existence itself. And basically, she makes the point that as her left brain was getting number and her right brain was becoming dominant, she was able to recognize what was going on. For example, she describes, she says, I needed to brush my teeth. So the right brain tells you need to do it. But without the left brain functioning, you can't figure out where your fingers are. You can't figure out the brush, because the left brain distinguishes between spatial distance and so on. The right brain just sees everything the way she put it, as a field of energy, which connects everything. So the connection is there, but there isn't the distinction between things. Literally what she says. And you got to hear it. It's mind blowing. Jill Taylor, right? Jill Bolton Taylor, right? Yeah. Right, there we go. Yeah. And she describes this in detail, which is exactly what the Kabbalah says about Hashem Echad, and describes in detail that before the Tzimtzum there was a unified field energy, there was a field of energy, everything was united. Think of it like a quilt with millions of objects, but on the quilt they're all connected. Compare it to string theory, that there's some type of intrinsic unity in all of existence. So atoms that are billions of miles apart know of each other. This has been proven, and that's faster than the speed of light. Just a simple intrinsic connection. On the other hand, we definitely live in a world where there are fragments. There are pieces. So it's seen that really both are true. It depends which part of the map you look at. If you look at let's say, take the human body as an example. Are you a sum of your parts, or is there something that's unified? You wouldn't say that you are made up of 75 trillion parts, 75 trillion cells, or that you have that many organs. You'd say you're one entity that's made up of components. And the body works with such symmetry that it's just beyond imagination. We don't even recognize. Take one breath down your lungs, how many forces are suddenly all working and feeding into each other? Swallow a piece of food, and a whole series of process begins. How do your eyes work together in coordination with your ears? When you walk down the street, that whole coordination. We take it so for granted that we don't even realize the miracle. When you appreciate it, God forbid, you go into a hospital, you see somebody does not have this coordination, or they struggle to breathe, you suddenly realize, one mutation, take one switch missing, and suddenly everything goes haywire. So we are really exactly that. We have components and parts. Clearly, our eyes are not our ears. But in essence, you could say it's really one field of energy, just expressing itself in different ways. And it's really seamless. It's literally seamless. It could go on and discuss it, but I think the point is clear. So, from the perspective that we're discussing here, when you list the items in your life and you see fragmentation, you basically have moved completely, and our lives are controlled and almost that invisible field of energy that unites everything is almost gone. But imagine you are in touch with that. Then you're in the moment. Every moment is part of that picture. And if you don't do your moment right, what happens? Let's take an example, a symphony. There's a symphony of 100-piece symphony. Everyone, they have violins and you have harps and you have the whole ensemble. Everybody's there. Now we know if symphony to go perfectly, everyone has to do their part in their moment. But let's say the one who's supposed to play a certain instrument suddenly gets nervous or watches someone else, and suddenly comes their time, they don't do what they have to do, or they do it too quickly. The key is for the music to play, you need the perfect coordination. You don't even need a symphony, just take a song full of musical notes, each note in its moment. Imagine the note started being insecure and saying, I don't know if I'm really necessary, or maybe someone else is taking away my turf, and start fighting for it. What are you going to end up having? No music. You'll have just chaos. In nature, you see this all the time. In nature, everything has its moment, its place, and it comes into play exactly when it needs to come into play, and moves off the stage when the next thing comes into play. You know why? Because they all see each other as one. No one's taking away from me, because if you don't play your part, you're compromising my part. We are the only creatures on earth that we can mess up the whole equation. So where do we develop this insecurity? Why should we not just feel secure with where we are right now? This is the moment I have. Because God created us in a way where we have free will, where we're able to be the only entities in existence that can decide not to play our music. You were given a music to play. You were put on this earth because you have a song to sing that no one can sing but you. Now, if our parents did not reinforce that, we grow up, we don't even know we have a song. And then we start looking, where's my song? I say, hey, maybe that one. You see somebody, you say, maybe that's what I'm supposed to do. Can you imagine people who have no jealousy? It's hard to imagine if you've ever had envy in your life. But why would someone not have any envy? Because they have what they need. Why would they be envious of someone else? There's a thing called, in Yiddish, it's called nishverginnen. In English, the word they use is a German word called schadenfreude. You know what schadenfreude is? Where someone else benefits, you gain nothing if they don't benefit, and still you can't stand that they're benefiting. You'd rather them not win, even though you're not going to win it either. It's called not forget. It's a very weird human ugly virtue. Ugly side to people. They just cannot stand that someone else is successful. And again, we're not talking about zenena v'zalechasa, meaning it's not like, if you didn't win, I would have won it if you had not won it. Okay, there you could say, fine. They tell the story about the guy who goes to a rabbi, a religious Jew, and with an animal, and says to the rabbi, is this animal kosher? He checks out, it's not kosher. Okay, too bad, he takes a $5,000 loss, but it's not kosher, that's it, he's a God-fearing Jew, this animal's not kosher. Then the same guy, a few months later, has a din Torah. He has a halachic tribunal with rabbis, where the argument is over $5,000 as well. This guy says, you owe me $5,000. He says, I don't know you. The rabbis rule according to the other person. So this guy gets up, the one who lost the money, and says, these rabbis are corrupt. They must have been bought off. There's no way. So the question is, here, you just took a $5,000 loss of an animal, no problem. Here suddenly, the same rabbis are saying, you lost. The answer is because here that other guy won. That's the problem. Here, it's no problem if he lost it, but the other guy won. So there's a feature, I don't want to even call it a feature, it's a weird thing that humans have. It all comes down to that the vices that we have, whether the vice of jealousy, or the other, what do they call, the 5 vices. I don't even know the list of them. They're somewhat Greek-based. But whatever they are, it all is rooted in a void. And the void is that if you don't know what you're needed for, you're ultimately going to be looking for it elsewhere, and ultimately disrupting the whole process. It's like the search for love. If you don't feel loved, you don't know how to love yourself. You don't feel that you have been loved, or you feel you don't deserve love, you'll always be searching for love, and you have to be wreaking some havoc in the process. Because if you actually do have love within you, and you're just not aware of it, or you deserve to be loved and you're not aware of that, you're going to do things that are going to be distortions in order to compensate. Now, hopefully no one in this room has these issues, but it's unlikely to say that because everybody's got some of these issues. And the question, as I said, when we learn from Abraham, is how does one find that? So the first thing you got to know is all problems begin by the lack of something that's positive. No one has a problem. A problem begins because there's a void. When there's nature abhors a vacuum, and so does the human being. If you were completely in the moment, you completely knew that this is what you should be doing, your mission, how many problems would it preempt? Who knows? It would be preempt almost anything, because you know what you need to do. And this is the sad part of our lives. The challenge and the good news is that from our forefather, a man like Abraham, and Sarah, his wife, you can learn tremendous focus, how to focus. The first thing you have to ask yourself is this. Okay, if I do have a mission, how do I find out what that mission is? It's the first question every person has to ask. The obviously would have been great if we were challenged to ask this question when we were 5 years old or younger, and throughout our lives. And then by the time you're an adult, you at least have a head start. But it's never too late. It's never too late. Now, of course, this immediately gets into a whole philosophical dilemma. Someone will say, well, who says I have a mission? So just for argument's sake, since we don't have all night, let's assume it's an axiom. In Judaism, that's the axiom, that your life has purpose, and purpose indicates design, and purpose indicates mission. And that each of us, because of the mere fact that we exist here, and no two of us are alike, indicates that each of us have something unique. Now, I know this resonates in everybody. It's also good for our egos to know that we have something unique to create that no one else but us can create. So we have an incentive to believe this. But I don't want to make it now a case for it, get into every philosophical argument for the... your alternative is basically the other opposite, which you can also choose, sadly, which is that you're insignificant and you have nothing to give. If you can be happy with that type of a life, what can I tell you? I wrote a book called Toward a Meaningful Life. Someone tells me I should write a book toward a meaningless life for people like him. Obviously, I did not take him up on his offer. I said, if you think you're meaningless, you don't need me to write a book to confirm this. I'm trying to suggest that you have meaning in life. That's something that needs to be fought for. Meaninglessness is very easy to live a meaningless life. You just don't do anything. You're able to handle that. It's good for you. But I think most of us would prefer. Is this a proof? I don't know if it's a proof, but let's put it this way: like the classic Pascal's wager. He says, "I'd rather live a life of virtue and kindness, and then find out there is no God, than to live the other opposite life and find out there is a God." So from a betting man's point of view, but I'm not suggesting doing this as a wager, a gamble. But what resonates is, and many of us live our lives, that we find what we're doing as significant. So the question is, how does one begin? Now, the good news again is that you don't really have to begin. It's inside of you. You're wired this way. Whatever it is that makes you unique is with you long before you're conscious of it. The fact that you're not aware of it, or you never paid attention, doesn't mean it's not there. So that's good news, because it means you just have to uncover it. You don't have to find it somewhere. So it's not like going to some store, traveling somewhere distant or close to find it. It's right here. Right? You see yourself? It's right there. However, you're not going to find it in the mirror. As a matter of fact, that's the last place you're going to find it. Because a mirror, which is a reflection of oneself, is exactly that. What's the difference between a mirror and a glass? A mirror is also a piece of glass. A mirror is a piece of glass with silver, what is it called? Coated on this back. Silver. You put a little money and a little silver on glass, it turns that you see yourself. It's not my word, this is a line I say from the Maral, some great sages that said this, where people who became very self-absorbed, because with a little silver, now silver doesn't have to be just money, whatever it is that causes you to become self-absorbed. And you look at the mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? It's you. Me. It's all about me. A glass is the ability to be able to see another. Now, of course, this is just metaphorical. It's also in our lives. Do we really see another? Where do you rate on the empathy scale, for example? Empathy for another human being. And usually you're not a good judge. You usually can't be trusted to be your own judge. You have to ask other people. Do they think you have empathy? Empathy. Empathy means that you're able to really put yourself in the shoes of another. That's a sign of a person who has the confidence and strength to not just focus on themselves. So this sounds counterintuitive, but many people think, that if I'm really a self-confident person, I should be focusing on myself all the time. No. People who are truly self-confident don't need to focus on themselves because they're not afraid of losing themselves. The people who are self-absorbed, narcissism is usually a direct subcategory of lack of self-confidence. Because you don't have the confidence to just be. And if you don't protect your own turf, who's going to protect your turf? So you become self-absorbed. It's not an easy thing to hear, because many of us don't want to see ourselves that way. But a direct outgrowth of insecurity is becoming self-absorbed. I'm going to take care of myself. And then at some point, it's not even a conscious decision, you just are that type of person. Now, how does one figure out nobody wants to find out that they're a narcissist. Nobody wants to find out that I'm the me is more important than anything else. Well, I don't know if you have to look at it so ugly in its naked face, but you have to be able to address these issues, maybe in a more backdoor way, by looking to the opposite. What is it that would make you feel unique and special? That's what it comes down to. But the challenge here is that we get so caught up in habits, it's very hard to break away. Which brings me back to another thing Abraham did that led him to be able to have such presence. He left his comfort zone. We read the last 2 chapters ago, Lech Lecha. That was Abraham's first journey. He left his comfort zone. Leaving your comfort zone forces you to have to look at everything in a fresh way. It includes perfect music for this suspenseful moment. So, leaving a comfort zone forces you to have to dig up new resources that challenge you. Most of us do. We gravitate to things that keep reinforcing who you want to be, or who you think you should be. So we basically surround ourselves with a whole army of reinforcements. And that, not only then are we trapped, we've also created a whole world that traps us. And this is not an easy thing to break out of. But that's why it's very healthy to choose to pick yourself up and get out of these comfort zones. Comfort zones are our worst enemy. One of the worst enemies. And for many of us, how could you say that? Comfort. Isn't it good to be comfortable? Yes. When I say comfort zone, I don't mean go pick yourself up and go into a dangerous situation. Comfort and danger are not antonyms. For me, comfort means not challenging, just staying stuck where you are. So we're not talking about going into a dangerous situation. But for some people, going out of their comfort zone, that already is dangerous. Which is why, sadly, what wakes most people up? Let's be honest. Crisis, trauma, loss, death. Unfortunately, those are the things those cracks are the ones that usually get people to think about things differently. And even they don't always work. So how could we compare, how could we initiate upon ourselves that type of intensity? Trauma is something nobody should ever have to go through. But loss, death of a close one in our lives, these are things that are imposed upon us, and they shake us up, and often can bring us into completely new places, and sometimes great places. Not that the tragedy is great, but what it leads to can be real greatness. So how do you simulate that? Simulate that is not easy to do. That's why it's not easy what I'm describing here. But if you are truly driven to succeed, and truly driven by the following question, I don't want to leave this earth, as Thoreau writes, with my song still inside of me, to die with my song still inside of me. For many of us, this becomes should be a driving force. That if you really have that blessing inside of you, that gift, and you're looking for everything in life to, so to speak, to fulfill yourself, and it's been given to you, and then you find out one day it was there right with you, instead you were spending your time looking elsewhere. Imagine you were given everything you need in your life, it's right inside of you, and spent the rest of the time, you spent your life window shopping. elsewhere because you didn't know you had it. It's not really a pleasant thought that anybody wants to come to. But I have to tell you that most people I find are doing exactly that. They're looking elsewhere when they have it right inside of them, right in front of them, and they just refuse. And it's not conscious, it's not deliberate, but they have replaced looking for it in the right way by trying to find it in other ways, the convenient ways, or what do they say? That example, the Chelam example, where the guy lost his keys at night, and they ask, and he starts looking for them, and someone says, "Let me help you find them. Where did you lose them?" He points 100 yards away. So if it's 100 yards away, why are you looking here? He says, because the light is shining here. You know? Now it sounds like ridiculous. Why would I look for my keys there when I lost them here? Because the light is shining. Because that's what you've been trained to go where light shines, instead of looking at the problem. It's a simple thing. We focus on symptoms and we don't look at the root. Very many of us can give good advice to others. Have you ever noticed you don't do the advice yourself? I don't know if you've noticed, but it's a pretty common phenomenon. What is that exactly? Explain that insanity. Because we minimize. When it comes to ourselves, there's a whole distorted view. You ever hear yourself on tape? You ever hear a tape of your voice, a recording? You like your voice? Nobody likes their voice. Maybe anchor people who've been trained. They have to listen to their voice. Most people don't like. Why don't you like your voice? It's your voice. And I know myself, when I hear a recording, I can't stand hearing it. I say, I can't believe people are listening to this. And trust me, people are. And people tell me, I really love your thing. And this I said. And then when I listen, it's very weird. Why do we like our own? Because we don't even hear ourselves. When you hear yourself speak, if you heard that recording, which is really what's being heard, you'd probably be quiet. Because there's something, when it's about ourselves, there's some type of, rest assured, there's some haze, there's some some distortion. You're not seeing yourself. And you just have to accept that as a fact. You do not see what others see. So if someone say to you, "Are you a good listener?" I have people tell me, "Yeah, very good listener." So I say, "Okay, let's ask your husband. What about your wife?" And they usually don't answer exactly what you answer. And of course, you'll say the next thing is, "They don't really know me." That was what you always hear. So nobody knows you. You don't know yourself. Now we're talking about listening. You know that you're a good listener, but no one that speaks to you thinks you're a good listener. So explain that exactly. Now again, you don't have to confront people this way because it's a little uncomfortable. Well, like the guy that says, "Okay, I remember someone come to me and they're saying they're 6 years, 7 years dating," which frankly is a little short time in New York. But he said it's going nowhere. So I said to him, this happened more than once. It happened so many times. But one scenario came to mind because it was quite, right. And I said to him, so let's look at the usual suspects, what the problem may be. She says, "You don't have to bother because I went through all the list of everything. So why are you coming to me? It's not, maybe I have something to say. Or maybe there's some mystical thing, some dibuk or some curse from heaven, which is always an easy excuse." So I said, "You know what? Indulge me. Let's go through the usual list, and if you went through it again, fine. We'll go through it." So you went through it again. We start going through things, this thing, that thing, that thing. I see right away wherever he resists talking about, obviously he didn't really go through. So I asked him, "By the way, do you have any blind spots?" She says, "Sure. Everybody has blind spots." So I said, "So maybe you just have blind." He says, "No, but I know what my blind spots are." Literally those words. I said, "Really? Can you explain that to me? Why is it called a blind spot?" So he's convinced himself that he knows what his blind spots are. So why is it a blind spot? So in his mind, why is it a blind spot? Because he didn't know it initially. Now he knows what it is. Now, it took a long time for me to explain to him that a blind spot means that you don't know what it is. And the rest wouldn't be a blind spot. And we all have blind spots. But I could not convince him. To be honest, I couldn't convince him because he's not interested. What I did tell him is that there's two types of blind spots. There are blind spots that you have them and you just don't know where they are. And there's a blind spot you don't think you have them. Then you're blind to the fact that you're even blind. I said, I think you're in that latter category, which is far worse. It's called denial. I said it in a nice way. He never came back to see me again, but what could you do? It wouldn't have mattered anyway. So, where he stands today, I see him from time to time. He's still living in his own realities. And I don't know, So I'm never I'm not a hopeless type. I don't feel that people are hopeless, but I don't know he's going to need something to shake him out of his comfort zones. My point is, we're all in the same boat, some more than others. Nobody sees everything straight. Ask accountants, ask consultants. Many of them, they'll say they pay me top dollar not to listen to me. They need to have, there's an accountant that comes in, but then nobody wants to hear that I made $1 million mistake this past year. I've heard this from many accountants. Now the guy says, your benefit to know that. But the ego, whatever it is, you can't deal with the fact that you made a mistake. So you convince yourself it wasn't a mistake, it was worth the investment because I learned from it, etc., etc. Which may be true too. But it's very hard to really look at things very directly. I'm saying this because you need to know what the enemy is. And the enemy is right in here. But also the friend, your ally, is also right in here. When we read a story like Abraham, even if we may never achieve that level, but there's an expression, Masa Yavai, when will you come to the Maisi? What Masa Yavai Maisi? When will my actions be like the actions of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah? When you read the story, you're reading about a master. It's like, it's like you like to play tennis. You watch a master play, you enjoy it even more. You're reading about a master. You're talking about a pioneer who was very honest, knew how to leave a comfort zone, as uncomfortable as it was, challenged himself, and yes, learned to be present. He learned that the most important thing in life is to know that you were put here. And when you're in a certain place, this is your mission. Nothing else matters. We are not such creatures because we are material human beings. We're always thinking, I don't have enough. Look at somebody else, they have more than I. Maybe what I'm doing is not what I should be doing, maybe I should be doing that. And this is basically a constant fluctuating reality. Ask yourself this question. Do you have anything in your life you're absolutely certain of? Absolutely certain. And I don't mean an answer like, you're absolutely certain that it's night right now. That's not what I'm talking about. Absolutely certain about something you believe in. A person who's absolutely certain that they're on a mission and that what they're doing right now is what they should be doing, guaranteed that their moment will be used to the fullest. So the question, the challenge we have to challenge ourselves is how to get to that type of state of mind. How to get that state of mind to feel that way. And I'm not suggesting cold turkey, suddenly it's impossible just to change things. It's starting small. You start in the morning, tomorrow morning, and you say Moda'ani. This is my suggestion. Moda'ani is a short prayer, which you may already say, but that's with a new intention. What are you saying? You're being cognizant of the present. The present is, I was just given, you wake up, you suddenly feel you're awake. As soon as you're awake, before anything else, consider it to be done, you don't even mention God's name. I acknowledge to you for returning my soul to me. So turn it into a meditation. It doesn't have to take long. But not a mechanical act. What is the meditation? The meditation is, I'm acknowledging that I was given another day. Here's a gift. You could not have been given this day. And I don't mean to say it in a morbid way. It's appreciating something you were given. So that's already a beginning, because at least you're appreciating it. It's not just, okay, I got another day, so great. And just make one question, ask yourself that morning. How will I justify to God at the end of this day that I was given this gift? As soon as you ask that question, it's not going to be how much money you make. It's not going to be how well you perform. It's not going to be how others compliment you. Those are all nice things, but they're all optional. That's not why the day was given to you. Do one thing that day that you can come when you go to sleep that night and say, I did something today that earned the right for me to have that day. And God not necessarily making a condition, unless you do that, I won't give you the next day. Look, the proof is in the pudding. Many of us don't do much a day, and we're still giving another day. That's not the point. The point is, it's for you. You're not doing this for God. You're not doing it for anyone else. You're doing it for your calling. Trust me, you ask that question every day, even if you don't do it every day, you're already beginning. Because it all begins with a question. You don't need to have the complete answer. It begins with a question, and it begins with your commitment to answering the question. Now, one of the most, I always find it to be extremely inspiring story with the Baal Shem Tov. And I use it all the time just to my own self and also when I travel. Story with Rabbi Mordechai Rappaport, was a big tzaddik in the Baal Shem Tov's times. He was one of the hidden tzaddikim. And the Baal Shem Tov, as it was customary, once sent him on a shlichus, on a mission somewhere. Went on this mission. We don't even know the story, what the mission was, frankly, in the story, if I recall correctly. We only know this detail. He came back, fulfilled what he had to do. Baal Shem Tov questioned him, how did it go, everything. So he says, I did what you asked me to do, everything is fine. Baal Shem Tov was not so happy, so satisfied with that, so he said to him, and how did you travel? How did you get to the place that you had to go to? So he started, he gave him his so-called GPS, navigational way. He went through this city, that city. No, the Baal Shem Tov insisted on the details. Okay? He didn't understand why, so he began to go into details. I traveled this city, I went to the inn there. The next night there was no inn. I slept at the side of the road. I woke up in the morning, and Baal Shem said, yeah, and what happened? He said, I woke up in the morning, I washed my hands, said my prayers, sat down to have something to eat. And what did you? And I took a cup of water from where? He said there was a spring of water on the side of the road. I filled it up with a cup and I drank. I made a blessing and I drank. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvarei, which is the blessing we make on water, that everything was made by your word, God's word. It's a general blessing we make on foods that don't have a specific, like whether it's mezainis or hamaitzi or ha'etz. Or a gofen. The Baal Shem Tov jumped up, all excited. Rabbi Mordechai was like amazed, like what did excite the Baal Shem Tov? Baal Shem Tov said the following words. It's like memorable. Think about this, you'll see in a moment why it's memorable. He said, the spring of water was waiting from the beginning of time for you to come to make a blessing on it. And this was despite the mission that he went and so on. That alone, seemingly insignificant thing. You know, he need a drink of water. Who doesn't have a drink of water? It wasn't part of his mission. But it was on his way. I've traveled many places in my life. I remember, some of you may recall, our camping weekends. See? We braved the elements, remember? As Svi pointed out, we were able to open up the heavens and had rain all Shabbos. How many people can do that? In the olden days, they had to pray and it didn't always work. We didn't even have to pray. Right? We just appeared and the rain. The thing was, we couldn't stop it. That was the problem. But anyway, we braved the elements. So we've been to many places. I've been to many places in my life. Whenever I go to a place, especially I've never been before, I always think about Baal Shem Tov's story. Because there's always a reason why you come there. Hashem mitzadi gover kananu, it says. God leads the footsteps of a person. So you always think you're going for the reason you went. Business trip, a personal trip, a tour. You know, we have some travelers here that travel around the world, right? And you may think you're going for one reason, but you're going because that's the mission of your life. Not the only mission. That the water was waiting for you. And I think about it, you walk on a path, you say, it was waiting here from the beginning of time for me to walk here, and what am I going to do with this once in a lifetime, once in a history opportunity? Imagine you were able to think about life that way. Anytime you walk down the street, you go here, you go there. You're not thinking about yourself, you're thinking about the calling. Why were you put here? It's a tremendous way to look at life. You tell me someone gets bored if you think that way? But what's the counter voice? The voice that says, oh, you know one thing, I need to pay my bills. Oh, there's another person that has more than I have. So I'm not saying we don't have challenges, but it's an attitude to life. What I'm suggesting is just introduce this attitude. I'm not suggesting change your whole life overnight. Just introduce it. Whether it's once a day, whether it's once a week. I would suggest once a day. Moda'ani. Tell me at the end of the day how you'll feel. If you could say at the end of the day, you know, today when I woke up, I said, well, I'm going to find out what I was given this day for, and I did something. And if you think it's hard to find something to do, it's not. It's just a matter of what's called simas lev. Just paying attention. You know, I've told the story a number of times here. It just always comes to me because it was one of these journeys. I was going to East Hampton for a Shabbaton a number of years ago. It's at least 15 years, maybe 17 years ago. I stopped for gas. Okay, you know, just another thing. And I was not thinking about Rabbi Mordechai Rapport's story, you know, but I stopped for gas. As I'm filling up the gas, a guy comes over, he's an attendant. But he's not a gas attendant. Right next to the gas station was a club. And he's the parking attendant for the party tonight. The club. So he asked me if I'm staying for the party. So I said, no, I have another party to go to. Shabbos party in East Hampton, you know, a few miles away. And we start talking. For some reason he was intrigued with me. He starts asking me, what do I do? And this, that. So I told him, you know, I teach, I write, wrote a book, taught a meaningful life. And I gave him a little And he said to me, "Oh, you send out a weekly email?" Because I mentioned that, I think. And he said to me, "I put me on the email list." He gave me his email address, some name. And I did it. I went on to my journey. I went to East Hampton, came back home, put his name in the thing. I started getting emails. I didn't pay much more attention to it. 5 years later, at least 5 years later, I get an email from him out of the blue. He writes to me, "You probably don't remember me. I was that guy that you thought was some hick, some redneck from somewhere out in Long Island, and we had this conversation. I started getting your emails, and you have to know I'm Jewish." He said he lost his parents' accent when he was young, never had any education, doesn't know anything about his Judaism. He says, "But now your emails have become," and he writes, "my Rosh Hashanah, my Yom Kippur, my Sukkot, my Hoshana Rabbah." He knew it all. My Hanukkah, I pray with it. This is what I do. Friday night, I say my prayer with your email. He didn't say he prays to me. Let's make that clear. We already had one Jew enough that people are praying to. And I was taken aback. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. Then I thought to myself, yeah, that's an obvious thing. Email, touched him, and so on. And I realized right away. I thought the Baal Shem Tov story. So here I was driving to East Hampton. I'm sure East Hampton events I don't even remember so much. But this story, which was completely in passing, it's maybe that gas station, and this guy was waiting from the beginning of time for me to come there. And it wasn't about me. It was the message. After that, I became this crazy email junkie. What they call harvesting emails. I plant them in my gardens, harvesting emails wherever I go. Because I never forgot it, because I said this is God's way. It's the easiest way. If there was no email, the odds that he would come to Shabbos or to come to a class in Manhattan were unlikely. But here's an email, no resistance, a press of a button, doesn't cost anything. So I always tell people, you use email, you use Facebook, you use all the social media, your mobile. For the 100 emails that you send, business or personal, whatever nonsense, and there is some nonsense, I'm sure, somewhere in there, send one email a day of something kind to somebody. You see a nice thought, forward it. What does that cost? Absolutely nothing. All it is just paying attention to something that's not about you, me. You'd be surprised that if you do this deliberately, day by day, they say in investment it's about exponential growth. Exponentially, this will have tremendous impact on you. And you want more of it, and you will do more of it. And then you start linking into discovering your mission. So discovering your mission in the soul doesn't necessarily mean you have to go for a 6-month sabbatical to find my mission on some mountain. It comes down to start acting that way. Act that way. Every morning you get this present called the present, the time that you're given. Use it. You'll use it for many things today, tomorrow. Find one thing where you can say at the end of the day, when you say B'yot Chav Kidruchi, you say just like Modani, I acknowledge to you for returning my soul. At the end of the day, there's the prayer, I entrust you with my spirit. And you can say, here's my spirit back to you for the night. The Medrash says that the neshama, the soul, goes back to like a fountain, a wellspring. That's where it gets refreshed. And you could say, and I give you here, hand delivered, my one act that I did today that I think you'd be proud of. I think this is a very good approach. It's not hard. You don't have to change your whole life. You don't have to make a new commitment. The difficulty will be, I'll tell you right now, it's not your habit. Brushing your teeth every morning, you do. Tying your shoelaces, there are things you automatically do. This is going to take, they say you have to do something like 16, 17 times until you start doing it consistently. Which is why you get junk mail 16, 17 times, because usually you open it after that amount of time. That's what they say. Marketers. Now, you could of course fight that, but the point here is, you're going to need to, that's going to be the challenge. How to make this become part of your routine. But once you do, it'll be probably the best part of your day. How do you like that? Because no matter whatever else happens in the day, and we can't always predict what will happen, this is in your control. Absolutely in your control. And then it starts giving back to you in profound ways. Now, how do I know this? Try it out. And you'll know yourself. So this is a way where we begin to emulate a little what Avram Avinu. So of course, the little man inside each of us, the little mischievous elf and devil, I should say, inside of each will say, okay, what's the big thing? You start doing this one thing, look at your life. Till now, you just messed it up. You have a screwed up life. What's this point? You cannot allow that voice to control. That's exactly what's going to happen. You say, what's the big? I'm going to do one little thing after everything I've done. Or what's this one thing compared to all the other things I do during the day that are not exactly so nice? That should not stop you. You know, what's the contradiction? Start with this, but remember, you will have voices that are going to minimize it and dismiss it. So that's up to you. No one can force you. You're going to have to force yourself. But you can anticipate that you'll have resistance, even though this sounds like such an easy thing to do, because we're not used to it. And you'll be amazed what it can do, because it turns the arrow around, and you suddenly start thinking in that way. And the more you think that way, the more you begin to think that way. That you are proactive. Most of what you do during the day is reactive. You come to work, you may have had a great morning, and you said, you know what, I'm going to work today, I'm going to be positive and all. And then someone says one thing and they screw up your whole day, your whole attitude. You know, we're reactive all the time. We're dependent on bosses, on clients, on unexpected things, curveballs coming from every direction. Anything can happen. Some of us are happy, nothing happened that day, bad, it's already a good day, you know. But here you have the opportunity to become proactive. And you can't imagine what empowerment does to you. It makes you feel that you have control. You know, I was just reading the New York Times, interesting article this Sunday in the review, the New York Week Review. It was called, ma'am, your burger was paid for, something like that. You could check it out. A very interesting phenomenon. You've heard of the concept of pay it forward, right? It's a popular book and then a movie. So instead of paying back a favor to someone, did your favor, pay it forward to someone else. So if you received a favor, do the favor to someone else. So there's this new trend. I don't think it caught New York yet, but it's in the Midwest and other places. A real trend. Read the article. Where people in these takeout food places, cars are paying for the people behind them. And remember, this is not a favor that you're going to get repaid, because by the time you know about it, the car has been pulled away. And I think they have a record there, like 450 cars in a row that did this in some places. And it's a trend. So this writer in the New York Times is trying to analyze, why would people do that? What's the motivation? It's like with complete chesed, without any repay, you know. And it's also very comfortable in a way, because like in a restaurant, you go over to someone's table and say, listen, I'll pay for you. It's always awkward. Here, it's completely very anonymous, and it's happening. So the writer analyzes that in the sense of the world where things are so much out of control, information overload, government shutdowns, all these things going on. People are trying to take control. And this is a little act that you control. It's an act of kindness. So yeah, it costs you $4, $5, whatever it is. I mean, however you analyze it, I find it amazing, such a trend, because usually you wouldn't think such a thing would happen. You know, once in a while you'll find an altruistic person. But a trend? It's interesting. So I said to myself, is because it feeds into a part of our human nature that wants to give, that wants to control in the good way, I mean. That wants to control what we do and not someone else tells us what to do. So, so there's hope for mankind is basically the point I'm making here. And now, is this going to mean that if suddenly there'll be no more selfishness and greed? Unfortunately, the people that should be giving are the ones probably that are not doing this. Like they say, what do they say? That football, football is not a good example. Baseball, I think, is more World Series, right? It's starting now. So, baseball, they say, so you have 70,000 people who need to lose weight watching 18 people who don't need to lose weight, Same idea. I guess the people that should be giving are the ones that need this lesson. But it doesn't matter. A trend is a trend. So my friends, what I have to say is the following. We had a great grandfather called Abraham. He pioneered a path that changed the world. He did not know what would happen. Even though he was made promises, God promised him that one day the world would be changed. Your children will be like the stars in heaven. He's a man that changed the world. There are 4 billion people literally on earth today that can trace directly their roots straight to Abraham. Because Abraham is the beginning of the whole Torah, and the Torah's approach to chesed, charity and virtue. He single-handedly created charity. Single-handedly went against the world that was taking and became a giver. And today, 2.5 billion Christians and 1.5 billion Muslims, and what is it, the few little Jews, 14, 15 million, whatever the number is, the latest studies, embrace this approach. Not getting into distortions and some this variation, that variation, but the concept is embraced. We live in countries today that there is giving. I remember a few years ago, Haiti suffered an earthquake. Haiti is one of the poorest countries on earth. If you're a student of history, you tell me what happened in the last 2,000 years when earthquakes or volcanoes destroyed countries. What happened? All the neighbors celebrated. They came to pillage and rape and steal everything in the neighboring countries. Great opportunity. They're destroyed by a natural act, or what the insurance companies call act of God. There, God is used. There's no separation of church and state in insurance policies, because money talks. You can blame God. Nobody can go. I asked a guy. I said, "Why do you call it the acts of God? Why don't you call it acts of nature?" He says, "Because nature. Then the question is, maybe then we're liable. God, we know for sure. It's not us. It's God, and that's it. Don't blame anybody. Nature. You could say, why should I be at fault? You're also a part of it. So when you need a convenient scapegoat, God is suddenly available. That's an aside. And what happened in Haiti a few years ago? All the countries are competing. Who's going to help? Now you could say they maybe have ulterior motives because they want to create McDonald's marketing or whatever for Apple computers. I don't know. Or because CNN and all the television is watching, it doesn't pass, it doesn't look good if you don't. But the fact is, this has changed. Once upon a time, countries were destroyed by everyone else, and Haiti has very little to offer in terms of resources or other things. Things have changed. Now, this doesn't mean that the battle is over, and doesn't mean that individuals still have plenty selfishness to go around, plenty of waste, plenty of narcissism, etc. But it tells you something, that there could be a trend. And remember, we are either part of the problem or part of the solution. So of course you could become cynical and skeptical and say, okay, you know what, this is an exception, I have reasons to... But you could also say that perhaps there are people, have a side in them, that this resonates with. At the end of the day, frankly, we're talking about ourselves as individuals. I can tell you what you get in return for becoming a giver, what you get in return for taking control, for sensing that you have a mission in your life, trust me, is worth every penny you pay for that. I don't just mean money, time and investment, because you become what you're supposed to be. You were sent on a mission. You're living up to your mission instead of trying to find someone else's mission. And that's how your time becomes sanctified. That's how your days become full. Because your day, just like the story with the spring of water, it was waiting for the beginning of time for you to come. Your day today, tomorrow morning, is waiting for the beginning of all time for you to take your day that was given to you. And your day is not my day, because your day has its opportunities that are unique to you, and says, okay, what are you going to do with this day? Are you going to sanctify it? Will you make a blessing? And I mean a blessing in the broad sense of the word. Will you give? Will you use an opportunity that came your way to help someone? Or you're just going to either waste the day, squander it, or worse, use it for destructive purposes, selfish purposes. And it's very, as I just suggested, it's very easy to make the decision. You don't need anything. You don't need to buy any manuals. You don't need any workshops. You just need to pay attention and start the day that way. Ask yourself that question tomorrow morning and end the day with one thing. If you forget, you always have the last minutes. You could always go to a computer and send a nice email to somebody. I guarantee you try this and make this part of your habit. You let me know in a few weeks what kind of impact it has. Not months, weeks. So that's, my friends, the story that I think we can take from Abraham. Obviously, Abraham was the highest standard of it, but that doesn't mean we can't learn from it in our own small little way. And as I said, the return is tremendous. The return is you become a proactive human being, a person that makes things happen and not waits for things to happen. Like the three types of people: the people who make things happen, the people who watch things happen, and the people who ask what happened. So, the question is, which one will you be? And I think we were given a gift here. We have a living, shining example, Abraham, and this is something each of us can do, a little Abraham inside of us. You don't have to wait till tomorrow morning, frankly. You could even begin tonight. So, I hope, I like to feel that this is things I've learned from my teachers and from my rebbes and so on. And it's the greatest gift to know that you are on a mission and that you're doing something toward, as I said, being part of the solution and not part of the problem. And you're influencing instead of being influenced. So here's the story, and that's hence the mission of the Meaningful Life Center. My mission is to help you find your mission. So I just dump it on you. That's half jest. But And please know that I am here, Velvel, our whole team, in any way that we can help you in this regard. And our journey continues week after week. All of you indispensable notes in this grand symphony. And remember, you don't do what you got to do. All of us are compromised. So if you're not doing it for yourself, at least do it for the rest of us. For me, for nothing else. And as I mentioned last week, Sonny Goldstein, who was the first that came to this class many, many years ago, who's returned his soul to heaven. So I guess he had his mission. So I want to just mention him as well, and thank everybody that's been here for the last, when did we begin? 32 years ago, 31 years ago. So it's all been like links in a chain. And in the spirit of the Baal Shem Tov story, links in a chain, each one giving and taking. I think I've probably gained more than anybody has gained from this coming together. And hopefully for many more years together, healthy ways. And everyone should be blessed with a very meaningful week, meaningful moment, meaningful hour, meaningful day and night. And until next week, I look forward to seeing you then. Philip will be giving his class tomorrow night, right, Velvet? And we will be here next Wednesday night. And enjoy your evening. Be well. Bye-bye. Thank you.